Joining me now is a presidential candidate, also a congressman from the great state of Michigan, Representative Thaddeus McCotter. Representative McCotter, first of all, welcome to the program. Thank you for being on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Social Security has been much in the news and much a part of the presidential debate in the nomination proceedings so far. And you unveiled a Social Security plan this week. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yes, I'm glad you brought it up because a lot of people aren't paying any attention to it because they're so busy trying to figure out what people should call Social Security. They don't seem to be interested in what they want to do to solve it. That's your mainstream media for you. But what it does is it starts from the premise that since people don't seem to want privatization, they don't want reduced benefits or raised retirement ages or raised payroll tax, you start from the premise that you use cuts in existing government programs to reduce spending. You then, within the system, allow people 50 and under to start every month in a personal investment account within the system to put a little portion away that can grow over time. Now, this reduces, as you can imagine, the long-term outstanding obligations of Social Security, and it does so by implementing individual choice, control, and free market forces. And the good news is the chief actuary of Social Security has said not only will it work, but he thinks that the investment opportunities within the system are so good that he expects 100% participation. And when it's all said and done, it becomes the greatest reduction of government spending and debt in history. Now, I'm kind of shocked that most people in the mainstream media don't seem to want to pay any attention to it and would rather talk about whether it's a Ponzi scheme or why Republicans are evil.
Well, let me ask you this question, because one thing about the Social Security program that I think maybe a lot of people don't know is that the Social Security Trust Fund is the number one holder of U.S. debt, that the trust fund is just treasury bonds. And whenever, Social Security program's in deficit right now, meaning they're paying out more in benefits than they're collecting in revenue, so they're having to dip into this trust fund to make benefit payments to people in the program. But every time they dip into that trust fund, the Treasury's got to make good on a bond, and that adds to the national debt. Under your plan, what happens with this trust fund? I mean, obviously the money's not going into the trust fund anymore. That means that the Congress can't take that money anymore. Is that something that has to be accounted to, too, when you're talking about paying for this plan?
Well, right. What you do is you use cuts in existing government programs that are wasteful, abuse, or can be better done by the states. So what happens then is, because you know how people used to talk about creating a lockbox on the whole Social Security program? This creates personalized investment accounts, which are lockboxes with your name on it. So they can't take it out of that system. It'll be used for investment within the free market. And by doing that, not only over time do you reduce the long-term obligations, not only do you keep the assets, real assets in there, the politicians can't go rate it because it's already been invested within the free market.
So what now this is how does this compare to what President Bush proposed during his term in office?
Oh, it's not the same thing as what President Bush tried to do. Was they wanted to use the payroll tax to divert money into private accounts. Now, the problem with that is, as you know, it's a redistributionist system. So the money goes in every month from the payroll tax, and then it goes out to beneficiaries. What would have happened is, because you diverted money from it, the government would have to borrow the money, pay extra interest to make the seniors whole. And it also scared the seniors because they were bearing the risk of this program as well as people with disabilities. What I'm trying to do, especially through not only reducing existing government programs, but by not touching the payroll tax, that means current recipients don't have to worry. The money's still going in. People on disability don't have to worry. And as for the private accounts themselves, you're guaranteed that even if the personal investment of the market goes down, when you come out of the system, you'll still receive the benefits you would have if you chose not to participate, which is also an option under this program. The irony as a Republican is, as you know, listening to the Democrats say that President Bush was bad for wanting to divert the payroll tax into Social Security savings, private accounts, President Obama's payroll tax holiday is diverting the payroll tax from Social Security for spending and consumption. So we leave the payroll tax alone.
That was the question I was going to ask you. I mean, the president is pushing his new jobs plan. A major part of his new jobs plan is this payroll tax cut. And really, doesn't that just exacerbates the problem we already have with Social Security by taking money out of a program that's already in deficit?
Well, you're right. And it's even worse than what they accused President Bush trying to do, because the payroll tax under President Obama is not being diverted into long-term savings. It's being diverted into short-term spending, with the concomitant burden on the seniors, and the government will have to borrow the money at interest rates to keep them whole.
Let me ask you this question. Do you think America's finally ready for something? In the past, Social Security has always seemed like political kryptonite. You know, people don't, like you say, they don't want benefits reduced. They don't want their taxes increased. They don't want it privatized. It's tough to take this issue on. But Governor Perry, obviously, and you talked about this, you know, the whole debate over whether or not it's a Ponzi scheme or whatever, kind of a useless, futile debate as far as I'm concerned, which I think you agree with. But what's interesting is that if you look at the polling numbers, it doesn't seem to have hurt Governor Perry so far. And from that, can we extrapolate that maybe American attitudes about this program have changed and that we're ready for reform?
Well, I think the American people are absolutely ready for reform. And what I think the problem is, though, for Republicans is the media, a debate, which I was, again, barred from being in, God forbid an idea be injected in a debate. But what happens is they'd rather have Republicans talking about how bad Social Security is and how painting us as not wanting to care about it or save it. And they do it in Florida. This is not a good scenario for Republicans. It might not have hurt Governor Perry in terms of the primary electorate, but it's clearly going to be an issue in the general. That's why what I think should happen is I would like my fellow GOP candidates for president, I'd like my colleagues here in the House or the Senate, if you don't like my plan, then put something out. It's time to put ideas in front of the American people because you're absolutely right. They are ready to see what the real solutions are. I've introduced a piece of legislation. It's not a plan. It's not a proposal. It's an actual piece of legislation they can look at and go through. It's been scored by the chief actuary of Social Security. I would urge people, especially the Republican candidates, to start putting ideas in real form and taking it to the American people rather than talking about which one of you thinks Social Security is bad and why.
And I think there's something to be said about that. To be honest with you, I mean, I don't necessarily mind Governor Perry coming out and saying some of the things he said about the status quo of Social Security, because I do think that a lot of people need a shot to the head to recognize that we can't go on with the status quo. Something's got to change, some sort of reform. But I think you make a good point in that we got to get beyond just saying, well, is it a Ponzi scheme? Is it not a Ponzi scheme? Is it a monstrous lie? What do you think about calling it a monstrous lie? We got to talk about actual reform.